organize a conference on laws of life, basically on biotechnology. And at this conference, the big industry was there, laying out their plans. They talked about how they had to have free trade in order to introduce GMOs and patents around the world. And of course, free trade isn't free if you're forcing other people to do something. It should be called forced trade. NAFTA should be called the Forced Trade Treaty. WTO should be called the Forced Trade Agreement. And the interesting thing is we've always had trade, you know. We've even had international treaties. We have the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. But what was new in the building of the WTO was new treaties introduced related only to agriculture. The first was to claim seed as property. And of course, they didn't say we're going to own seed now. They said we will have intellectual property rights in seed. And intellectual property rights means property in the product of the mind. And I always joke and say, first of all, Monsanto's not a person, so it doesn't have a mind. And how can it have a property in the mind? In any case, you can't have property in the mind, in the products of the mind, because any product of the mind is a commons, just like seed is a commons. The treaty in WTO is called Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights Agreement. And then there was and this treaty was literally drafted by Monsanto. They've acknowledged it. There was another treaty called the Agriculture Agreement, which was drafted by Cargill. Cargill was, vice president was deputed to be your representative in agriculture, and they wrote this agreement, which was just about how to grab, after having controlled the US agriculture, how do you control the rest of the world's agriculture? So we, of course, started to mobilize and act and had rallies of 500,000 farmers. I started Navdanya to basically say that seed is nobody's property. And seed can't be privatized. Seed belongs to life, the planet, and all of us. And saving seed is our duty. And that is why any law that interferes in this duty should not be obeyed. And so we've declared from the beginning that any patent law that will prevent us from saving seeds, because for those of you who don't know, a patent is an exclusive right to prevent anyone else from making, using, selling, distributing the patented product. And a patent is granted for an invention. But seed is not an invention. Seed can be modified, seed can be evolved, but it doesn't get created from scratch. Just like life doesn't get created from scratch, even though Craig Venter, with synthetic biology, thinks he can claim to be the creator. The idea of patenting of seed is wrong, legally, scientifically, ethically. And that's why we've always committed ourselves to building community seed banks, keeping seeds in farmers' hands. We've built more than 60 community seed banks now in India. And as time passes, more and more communities realize that you can't let seeds slip out of your hands. Because if you let seeds slip out of your hands, a number of things happen. The first thing that happens is the new seed you buy is patented, you have to pay a royalty, it's very high cost. And let me give you the changes that took place in India when genetically modified cotton was introduced. Seed that used to be either zero, because it was your own seed, or if you bought it at 5 rupees. It jumped to 4,000 rupees a kilogram. The farmers were made to believe, oh, it's going to give you 1,500 kilograms an acre. It's been giving about 200 to 300 kilograms an acre. It's supposed to be a miracle seed that controls pests. The pests have become resistant. Just like the super weeds here, super pests in India. The combination of all of this new cost to the farmer translates into debt. Now, Indian farmers are very hardworking, extremely resilient, and suddenly they're in deep debt, and the agents that sell the seed to the farmer come and say, now you owe your land to me because you borrowed for seed against your land, like a mortgage. And that's the day the farmer goes quietly to his field and drinks pesticide to end his life. 250,000 farmers have committed suicide in the last decade. That's 250,000. The World Health Organization has a definition of genocide. It says any deliberate harm to a community is a genocide. It doesn't say it has to be only an ethnic community. And I believe what's taking place on the planet with the destruction of our small farmers, with the most blatant violation being in India, is the genocide of our farmers. Of course, now the data is piling up. This is government data, it's not ours. What we do is studies. We go to villages and find out. And Monsanto's been putting out ads because they know this is kind of catching up with them, that the debt, they take out 10 billion rupees of profits as royalty. It's coming from the farmer. You're squeezing the blood of the farmer. That's where Monsanto's profits are coming from. You're squeezing the blood out of the farmer and you're squeezing life out of the seed. Monsanto has been putting out ads talking about how Indian farmers are now millionaires. And they even put a planted news, these days they can pay and put a news. And it turns out that, they talked about 2 villages where these millionaire farmers exist. Because we have programs in this area, I rang up, and it turns out farmers have committed suicide in those villages too, where Monsanto is denying it. And the communities rang me up, and we are going to do a participatory study by the families themselves, so that every village, and in those 2 villages, every household will do their own report. Because Monsanto is constantly putting these fabrications. Another one is Kenya. They said, oh, there's this miracle sweet potato. Woman called Florence Wambugo was flown all around the world. She's going to feed Africa. Sweet potato project has totally failed. And Florence Wambugo doesn't get heard of anymore. If we were to start adding the failures of genetic engineering, the experiments they've done and the promises they made, there's nothing to show. So I call it false promises and failed technologies. And we're bringing out a new report, a global report, because everyone's busy, Californians are busy with California, we are busy with our suicide bells, Argentinians are busy with the pollution caused by spraying of Roundup from the air that is killing children, destroying small farms. And we realized it is time to bring out a citizens' report so that citizens can know much more about what's actually going on with these false promises of industrial agriculture feeding more, of genetic engineering creating miracle seeds. The real issue is we're repeatedly told without genetic engineering the world won't be fed. And now there's a food crisis and there's a climate crisis. And therefore we must have genetic engineering. Now let's take both those aspects together. Genetic engineering does not increase the yield of any crop. The yield is contributed by the original plant into which the new genes are introduced. And as I said, there are only 2 kinds of genes so far that dominate. Bt genes and Roundup Ready genes, both are toxic. So if you want to say